The sensor technology alone is revolutionary. The UK has disclosed that GCAP's multifunction radio frequency system will produce over 10,000 times more data than existing fighter radar systems. That is not an incremental improvement. That is a paradigm shift. It means GCAP will see threats, track targets, and coordinate attacks at a scale and speed that 4th and 5th generation fighters simply cannot match. The aircraft will feature AI-enhanced battlefield awareness through helmet-mounted displays that give pilots 360-degree vision, replacing conventional instrument panels entirely. AI-based threat detection and response systems will reduce pilot workload while enhancing combat effectiveness through real-time adjustments of mission parameters and threat data. Unlike previous stealth jets that rely on radar-absorbing coatings and faceted airframes, GCAP will use adaptive structures and fluidic actuators that dynamically decrease radar signatures during flight. The newly unveiled GCAP model features an enlarged wingspan for improved stealth and aerodynamic efficiency. Advanced variable cycle engines will cruise economically but still deliver high thrust when required, adapting between multiple power modes in real time for unprecedented operational flexibility. These engines are being developed through a fully integrated partnership between Rolls-Royce, Avio Aero, and Japan's IHI, with Japanese officials targeting a first flight around 2030. The performance specifications are staggering. GCAP is designed for maximum speeds of Mach 2.5, a service ceiling of 65,000 feet, and dual engines providing 150 kilonewtons of thrust each, roughly 35,000-pound class. But the real innovation is manned-unmanned teaming. GCAP is being engineered to pair a crewed stealth fighter with unmanned collaborative aircraft, loyal wingman drones that can extend sensing range, carry additional weapons, or absorb risk in the opening hours of a high-end conflict. In practical terms, that means one GCAP fighter could control 3 or 4 drones, multiplying Japan's effective fighter count without building hundreds of additional manned aircraft. In November 2025, Atla and Subaru tested jet-powered drones launched from a UH-1 helicopter as part of Japan's push to develop its own loyal wingman capability to counter China. In January 2025, Japan's Ministry of Defense awarded Boeing a contract to test aerial drones for the country's manned-unmanned teaming research and development program. The United Kingdom delivered Storm Shroud Mach 1 into service in May 2025, the first autonomous collaborative platform in the Royal Air Force. Storm Shroud is designed to increase the survivability and effectiveness of F-35B Lightning and Typhoon pilots by blinding enemy radars. Boeing's MQ-28 Loyal Wingman completed 100 test flights by March 2025, and in June 2025, Boeing and the Royal Australian Air Force successfully validated interoperability using 2 uncrewed MQ-28s controlled from an E-7A wedge tail at Woomera Test Range. More importantly, it signals that Japan is no longer just a customer for defense technology. It is a producer, an exporter, and a leader in next-generation air power. By collaborating on this initiative, the 3 nations will share the substantial costs, amounting to billions, and aim to secure international orders while seeking export markets to enhance production volume. This is not just an upgraded F-35. GCAP is designed to be a network-centric warfare platform with AI-driven decision-making, covertness, and the ability to command swarms of autonomous drones in real time. It represents a complete transformation in how air superiority will be achieved in the 2035 to 2050 timeframe. And China knows it. Japan's strategy targets the exact weaknesses in China's approach to the Western Pacific. Beijing has invested heavily in layered air defenses, long-range missiles, and networked sensors designed to push American carriers and aircraft out of the region. It is called anti-access, area denial, ATU, AD, and for years it worked. But Japan is building an air force designed specifically to operate inside that threat envelope. F-35s can penetrate advanced air defenses. That is, diplomatic language for Japan, can now strike targets we thought were safe, and we do not have a good answer. And the timeline matters. By 2035, when GCAP enters service, China's current J-20 stealth fighter will be 25 years old. Even if Beijing develops a sixth-generation fighter by then, it will be playing catch-up to a platform designed from inception to fight for air control in the Western Pacific's dense missile and sensor environment. So, can Japan build an air force powerful enough to stop China from dominating the Western Pacific? The answer is yes, and it is already happening. Here's what you need to remember. First, Japan is assembling the largest F-35 fleet outside the United States. 147 aircraft, backed by carrier-capable F-35Bs, operating from converted helicopter destroyers. That gives Tokyo stealth air power projection across the East China Sea and beyond. Second, Japan is developing GCAP, a sixth-generation fighter with sensor fusion 10,000 times more powerful than current systems, manned, unmanned teaming, and complete sovereign control over upgrades and exports. That jet will rewrite the rules of air combat in Asia when it enters service in 2035. Third, Japan is no longer dependent on the United States for its air defense. It has built an independent industrial base, loosened export restrictions, and established itself as a regional leader in next-generation fighter development. That shift changes the strategic calculus for every nation in the Indo-Pacific. The question now is not whether Japan can deter China, it is whether Beijing can adapt fast enough to counter an adversary it underestimated for decades. And based on the current trajectory, time is running out. Support the channel by liking and sharing this video, and subscribe to stay informed about the next wave of technological innovation. Can a nation that renounced war just 70 years ago become China's worst nightmare in the skies? Japan just answered that question with a record $58 billion defense budget, and Beijing is watching every move. Half of that money is going toward one thing: fighter jets. Not 50. Japan is building a fleet of 147 F-35 stealth fighters, the largest outside the United States. But that is just the beginning. Tokyo is modernizing its entire air combat force and developing a sixth-generation fighter jet with technology so advanced it will make China's J-20s obsolete before they ever fire a shot. Beijing knows this. Chinese military analysts have already warned that Japan's new capabilities represent a serious threat to regional stability, and they are right to be worried. Here's how Japan is transforming from a pacifist nation into an air power nightmare for China, and why this changes everything in the Western Pacific. For decades, Japan's military was handcuffed by its post-World War II constitution. No offensive weapons, no power projection, no real deterrence. China took advantage. It deployed hundreds of advanced fighters near the East China Sea, buzzed the disputed Senkaku Islands with military aircraft, and built a regional air force designed to dominate every mile of airspace from Taiwan to Okinawa. Japan's Air Self-Defense Force scrambled fighter jets 704 times in fiscal year 2024 alone to intercept foreign military aircraft approaching Japanese airspace. Of those scrambles, 464 were in response to Chinese aircraft and drones, representing 66% of all interceptions. Chinese drone incursions tripled from 9 in 2023 to 30 in 2024. Marking what Japan's military chief called an extreme increase. These were not accidental flyovers. Chinese drones had shifted from experimental flights to full operational deployment, deliberately probing Japanese air defenses. In August 2024, China crossed a red line. A Chinese military surveillance plane deliberately entered Japanese territorial airspace near Nagasaki, marking the first known violation of sovereign Japanese airspace by the People's Liberation Army Air Force. Beijing claimed it was completely accidental, but the timing told a different story. The incursion occurred just one day before U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan's visit to China, signaling that Beijing was willing to escalate pressure on Japan, regardless of diplomatic consequences. Then, in July 2025, Chinese fighter jets flew within 30 meters of a Japanese military patrol aircraft over the East China Sea, an aggressive intercept that Japan's defense ministry described as potentially catastrophic. In September 2024, a Chinese aircraft carrier and 2 naval ships sailed directly between Japanese islands near Taiwan, creating what Tokyo called a situation that could seriously impact Japan's security. The pattern was unmistakable. China was not just challenging Japan's air defense identification zone anymore. It was systematically testing Japanese responses, gathering intelligence on reaction times, and normalizing military operations in waters and airspace Tokyo had controlled for decades. Chinese Coast Guard vessels were spending over 30 hours continuously inside the territorial waters of the Senkaku Islands, not just passing through, but actively exercising what Beijing claimed were law enforcement rights in sovereign Chinese waters. Japan's aging F-15J fleet, some units, dating back to the 1980s, struggled to keep pace. Scrambles against Chinese and Russian aircraft became routine, numbering in the hundreds annually. Russian aircraft prompted 237 intercepts in fiscal 2024, up from 174 the previous year. Combined Chinese and Russian bomber formations flew joint patrols around Japan, with nuclear-capable Tu-95 bombers meeting Chinese H-6 bombers and J-16 fighters in coordinated demonstrations of force. The threat was clear. China's expanding stealth fighter fleet, backed by long-range air-to-air missiles and networked sensors, was shifting the balance of power. Chinese long-range weapons now posed a serious threat to U.S. air bases, aircraft carriers, and aerial refueling tankers across the Pacific. And Japan's traditional reliance on American protection was no longer enough. So, Tokyo made a decision that shocked analysts around the world. It didn't just buy a few new jets. It launched the largest fighter modernization program in the Indo-Pacific outside of the United States. The question driving everything Japan is now doing is simple. Can Japan build an air force powerful enough to stop China from dominating the Western Pacific without waiting for the United States to show up? Japan is assembling the largest F-35 fleet outside the United States, 147 aircraft in total. That includes 105 F-35A conventional takeoff models and 42 F-35B short takeoff and vertical landing variants. To put that in perspective, Japan will operate more F-35s than the United Kingdom, Italy, or Australia, more than any potential adversary in the region. The first wave is already operational. Misawa Air Base in northern Japan hosts 2 full squadrons of F-35As. Komatsu Air Base is home to another 2 squadrons, and in August 2025, the first 3 F-35Bs touched down at Nutabaru Air Base on Kyushu, Japan's southern island, marking the beginning of a new era in Japanese air power. These jets are not defensive ornaments. They are designed for offensive strike missions, rapid response, and operations in contested environments where older fighters would be shot down before they ever got close. Chinese military analysts have been blunt about the implications. The introduction of F-35B fighters gives Japan unprecedented rapid response aerial combat capabilities, significantly enhancing surprise attack and assault potential. Translation: Japan can now launch stealth strikes from bases that were previously used only for helicopters and patrol aircraft. That compresses response times, complicates Chinese targeting, and forces Beijing to defend against threats from directions it previously ignored. But the real game changer is not just the numbers, it is where these jets will operate. Japan is converting its 2 Izumo-class helicopter destroyers, JS Izumo and JS Kaga, into light aircraft carriers capable of operating F-35Bs at sea. The modifications include heat-resistant deck coatings, reinforced landing zones, deck status lights, and landing guidance system. JS Kaga's conversion is scheduled for completion in fiscal year 2028, with Izumo following in 2027. Once operational, these carriers will give Japan the ability to project stealth air power hundreds of miles from its coastline directly into the East China Sea and the western approaches to Taiwan. And Japan is not stopping there. Chitose Air Base in Hokkaido, one of the northernmost bases in Japan, will become the third site for F-35A deployment, receiving 20 jets starting in fiscal year 2030. The first 8 aircraft are budgeted for delivery that year. This expansion directly responds to China and Russia deploying stealth-capable fighters in the region, creating overlapping zones of control that make it harder for either adversary to operate freely. Here's the kicker. Japan is also establishing itself as the regional F-35 maintenance hub for the Indo-Pacific. That means, during a conflict, Japan could repair and rearm not just its own F-35s, but also American, Australian, and South Korean jets operating in the theater. In a prolonged war with China, that capability could be the difference between sustaining air superiority and running out of flyable aircraft. But Japan is not betting everything on American-made jets. It is building something even more dangerous, and it is doing it with partners that give Tokyo complete control over its own destiny. The Global Combat Air Program, GCAP, is a joint development effort between Japan, the United Kingdom, and Italy to build a 6th-generation stealth fighter for deployment in 2035. This is not just a procurement agreement or a technology-sharing deal. GCAP is built on a treaty framework that established a standing international government organization with program headquarters in Britain and leadership deliberately split across all 3 nations. Japan is investing over $1 billion in 2026 alone to keep the program on schedule. The first technology demonstrator flight is set for 2027, with full operational capability targeted for 2035. GCAP represents the merger of Japan's former FX fighter ambition with the UK-Italy Tempest program, creating a single, unified platform designed specifically to counter future Chinese fighter jets in the 2030 to 2040 timeframe. Unlike the United States' next-generation air dominance program, GCAP is being built from inception as a system of systems, a manned stealth fighter that commands unmanned combat drones, coordinates across networked sensors, and dominates dense missile and sensor environments exactly like the ones China is building in the Western Pacific.